Very cool. Okay, I'm just quickly opening a YouTube video, which is a very cool reference for dialogue. I'm not going to chat to everyone again after this session just because I do want to get started with the class and we're already quite late. So if you are not staying for the class, is everything good? Do you have any questions? This is your moment to exit? All good? Okay. Bye, Di. Bye, Christian. Bye, Suzanne. Okay. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the retreat, Christian. Okay. Goodbye. All right, friends. Hi, Audrey. It's nice to see you. What you'll be noticing, dear friends, in the next few weeks is that we will be getting some rewriters who are going to join us just for the writing sessions. I will set up a separate chatting session with them and all kinds of things, just because we are quite a big group and I want to get through all the stuff. But we are going to get a lot of writing done this week. Okay. So, do we have any questions before I jump into the dialogue class? All good. Okay. Is there someone here who does not like dialogue at all? Who feels intimidated by dialogue? Good, Ruthie. It's lovely to see you. Um, how do we feel about dialogue, friends?
Well, I love it.
Great. Okay.
I've got lots in my
Um,
stories.
good. Okay. Ruthie, how are you feeling? Ruthie also says she likes dialogue.
Yeah, I absolutely love dialogue. It's all the rest I can't do. I can write. The dialogue is awesome.
Okay, no, great stuff. It is really, yeah, it's one of those things that I just absolutely adore.
Help drive
Um,
sales.
sorry.
Or side shut.
Shh, shh, shh.
Oh,
This is
that's not me.
me.
Okay.
No, 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 that is me. I just want to find out how to get this link to you because I'm going to drop it into the chat. So what I'm not going to talk about today is how to punctuate dialogue and stuff like that, because trust me, that is the most terrifying, boring thing to have to listen to, someone else telling you where to put the full stops. What this video is that I've just dropped in the chat is a very cool video about how to punctuate dialogue. It's about 30 minutes. What's really cool about it is she's got a cheat sheet that you can download. Okay. And if you're unsure about dialogue punctuation, because that's where the biggest trouble comes in for most people, is how to punctuate the dialogue. That's a really, really cool resource to go do. And like I said, it's torture watching someone explain dialogue, but she actually does it in such a way that it's not too bad. So just go for it. All right. It's a really, really cool video to watch. Highly recommend. Helen says, I'm not too bad, but looking forward to improving it. Okay. So,
Sorry, Mia,
uh,
can I just interrupt for
yeah,
1 second?
Jason. Yeah.
Just want to if anyone is interested in seeing YouTube videos with no ads,
Yeah.
then you can use a website called skipcut.com.
Okay.
And so you take your YouTube link that you've got there and you paste it in. You don't get the AI generated slop ad at the beginning, and you don't get any of the interrupting ads in the middle.
Okay. That's very helpful. Cut.
Skipcut.com.
Okay, yeah, because sometimes I use YouTube videos to teach, and then in the middle of the class, it's telling me stuff, and it's very exciting.
It
Um,
will it will automatically start the video, but you can pause it and
yeah, that's
control
fine.
it the same way. But yeah, that way you don't get any of the advertising.
Thank you for that. All right, so to me, I always start with dialogue because dialogue to me. Well, I start with the dialogue class. It seems crazy, but there is a method to where and when I've placed these classes. So you'll notice, for example, we do character class quite late in the year. I don't start with character, which it's the first thing on the page, but you know what? You don't know this character yet. So for me to like go, you have to do character now, it's premature. I only get to know my characters once they're on the page, and once I've spent a suitable amount of time with them, I know who the character is. Okay. Otherwise, I'm trying to force my character into a direction and my character wants to go somewhere else and then we're at loggerheads and it's just an unnecessary fight. Okay, so I let them run free for a while and then I rein them in later. Okay. So, dialogue is also to me just okay. So, dialogue I do first, or one of the first classes, because dialogue, well, to me is relatively easy. Okay, dialogue to me, my stories come out almost only dialogue. Okay. And when I say only dialogue, I mean only dialogue. They're just talking, which for my first very rough version of the story is not a problem. I don't post that. I don't share that because that's definitely not it. I know that I have to go in and add things. But when my scene comes to me quickly and that dialogue is just doing this, it's hard for me to even keep up with just the dialogue. Okay. Dialogue is the fastest and the easiest way to invigorate your scene. Okay, because sometimes I'm this writer and I must set the scene and I must impress you with my literary prowess and my extraordinary vocabulary. No, tell me the bloody story. Okay, and dialogue makes you tell the story. Okay. Yes, we want the beautiful descriptions. Yes, we want the backstory. Yes, we need the narrative. Okay. But dialogue plunges us into a moment of action. Dialogue makes our characters act. Dialogue gets you out of the character's head because that is where you're going to get stuck. Okay. When you write these down, troubleshoot your scene. If the scene isn't flowing, if you can't get the scene done, is you're probably describing too much. You don't have action. Your character isn't doing anything. Okay. And by doing stuff is usually pursuit of the scene goal. The scene goal, which is in pursuit of the story goal. Okay. Or you're inside your character's head. When I'm thinking about the options of my life and what I could possibly do, I'm usually sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. Is that the most exciting thing to watch someone do? No. We want to get our characters off the couch and out the door. Okay. Dialogue is one of the easiest ways to do that. You have heard, okay, so and the last thing why you get stuck is because you're telling too much, which is describing a narrative and not enough action. That's like a thing for that. You are telling too much. Dialogue, if you've ever struggled with show, don't tell, add dialogue. Dialogue is one of the primary and easiest ways to move your scene from telling to showing. I am not one of these people who go, you have to show all the time. You have to show most of the time, but there are times when you must tell. And that's fine. You'll know when those times are. But if your entire book is just telling, it's going to definitely be a slower read. And your readers may not be as invested. But the only rule for telling is if you must tell, tell beautifully. Okay, that I want beautiful sentences. I want a gorgeous vocabulary. I want lovely words on the page that enchant me, make me stop, make me gasp at their beauty. Okay, or at their terror, or at their horror, or at whatever it is you're doing in that piece. If you must tell, convey emotion. Okay. So let's talk about dialogue. The first thing that we often misunderstand is, so okay, let's start with my quote. I love this quote. It's by Jerome Stern, and he says, dialogue is not just quotation. It is grimaces, pauses, adjustments of blouse buttons, doodles on a napkin, and crossings of legs. What does that mean? Okay. We often misunderstand or underestimate what dialogue includes. Dialogue is not just the words spoken aloud. Yes, that's number one. Dialogue includes the words spoken aloud. It is the attributions like he said and she said. But also the body language of your character. What am I doing while I'm speaking? Have you noticed that I do not sit still when I talk? I'm either clutching my cup of tea or I'm gesturing with my hands or my head is moving. We move when we talk. We don't sit still. So what the body language of the character and then the thoughts of the viewpoint character. This is where we get into trouble with dialogue because that's where we head hop. You have to, if you're in an omniscient viewpoint, just be a little bit more aware of that. But dialogue, thoughts of the viewpoint character, body language, tags, he said, she said, and the words spoken aloud. That's all dialogue. Okay. Now, why do we have dialogue in a story? Okay. The first thing is dialogue shows character. It's always very interesting when we start these Zoom meetings, everyone turns their cameras on and you think, oh, who's this person? I wonder who this is. And they start speaking and they sound different to what you thought. Or you've all been in a situation where we've been emailing or texting with someone and we finally meet them in real life. And it's just like, oh my goodness, what a surprise. Okay. When we speak to someone or when someone starts speaking, that's truly when we show character. Okay. You'll hear it often in writing classes, show character, show character, show character. How do you do that? Dialogue. Okay. Dialogue moves the story forward. When your characters speak to each other and they give each other information or they reveal secrets, that moves the story forward. So I don't have dialogue to say, hello, how are you? Yes, I'm fine. Of course, yes, my name is Jane. It's so lovely to meet you. That's not the dialogue I want. The dialogue I want is, what the hell were you thinking? You have betrayed me. You lied to me. That moves the story forward. Not hello, how are you? Okay. Unless your character's hedging, then it's fantastic again. Okay. So dialogue shows character. Dialogue moves the story forward. Dialogue adds tension and conflict. When your character lies, when your character hedges, when your character refuses to speak, when your character speaks too much, when your character says the wrong thing, when your character puts their foot in it, okay? That is all conflict and tension. Okay, that is what dialogue does to you. It adds conflict and tension. Dialogue also gives information. So one of the things like kind of, you'll often hear is don't use backstory. We don't start with backstory. We can't have the backstory. It's too much backstory. But we sometimes need backstory because the events of a character's past is what is influencing their present and their reactions in the present. So I need to understand if my character has this exaggerated reaction to a seemingly normal situation, why does that happen? And that answer usually lies in the backstory. So how can I use dialogue to give information or to give backstory or to give the narrative? Okay. What does this place look like? Does it have to be a 5-line paragraph? What happened to this character in their childhood? Does it have to be a 5-line paragraph? No, it can be a conversation. Okay. This place is a dump. What were they thinking? How could they have done this? Can you see how I've created a picture in your head without going, it was a sad and derelict place? Okay. Dialogue. If my character's phone rings and they're with their best friend, okay, their phone rings and the caller ID says mom, okay, the bestie is going to pick up the phone and go, hey, Mrs. G, how are you doing? Oh, so good. It's so nice to hear from you. Okay. What does that tell you about the relationship with the mom? Mom phones, bestie knows mom. It's a happy conversation. Okay. If the phone rings and bestie goes, it's your mother. And she turns to the protagonist and goes, how did you get this number? And the protagonist is like, ugh, I don't know, but I've been having these missed calls the whole time. How could this work? Oh my goodness, how did my mother get? Can you see how I'm giving you backstory without going, this character doesn't want to see their mother or talk to their mother. We don't know why yet, but that is enough that I can do with backstory, give information with my dialogue. Okay, shows character, moves the story forward, adds conflict, and gives information. And then possibly one of the most underrated things that dialogue does for you is it gives white space. That is truly one of the most overlooked advantages of dialogue. Okay, I really want to see if I can show you an example of white space. Or a lack of white space. No, not that one. Okay, I'll see if I can find it later and then I'll show it to you. Okay, so dialogue gives white space. What is white space? White space, this is a design principle where we say the absence of text draws your eye to the text. Okay, so this is, sorry, it's on my Kindle on my phone. Can you see here? There is white space on the page. Okay, there. Wait, I have a book. I never have a book near me. All of this is white space, right? And we want that on our pages. Why do we want that on our pages? When you are sitting with a really big piece of writing, like a huge chunk of writing, and it is very solid blocks of text, and it overwhelms your reader before you have even started reading. Can you imagine if you are if you're tired and it has been a really, really long day and you are exhausted and it is just this giant solid block of text that looks up at you. Are you excited to read that story? No, you're overwhelmed before you've even started. Okay, so that is why we want to include white space in our books. You've all seen the classics, okay, and how, especially if it's been reprinted several times, that it actually becomes a little overwhelming because it's just too much. The text is too small. There's too much of it on the page. It is really, it's too overwhelming. And that is why we want white space. Okay, so does everyone have the 5 things that dialogue does for you? Okay. Do I need to recap for anybody? I've just closed my notes, so give me a moment. Come on. There we go. Okay. Let's go and see what happens next. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about with dialogue is the word said. Said is the unsung hero of dialogue. Okay. Said is a beautiful word. Use said. Stephen King actually gives us like a rule of thumb where he says 90% of the time you use said, 10% of the time you use other words. Okay. By other words, I say things like retorted, questioned, replied. Okay. The challenge is with those words that doesn't happen with said. Is said turns into this beautiful little imaginary, invisible thing. Said is there. Said does its job, but said isn't invasive. Said doesn't come across as repetitive. Pay attention in the books that we read, because sometimes the characters just say the same things over and over again, and it's actually in how they're in the dialogue tags. And that is where you give yourself away. That is where, and what I say by giving yourself away is that's where you as a writer intrude on the reading experience. The ideal situation that you want is that when I'm reading, I'm so immersed in the story that I'm not aware of the presence of the writer. Okay, and the presence of the writer intrudes when I use the words too many times. Also, things like that is why we also say, I'll come back to the adverbs at the moment. So I'm not against adverbs of manner. Okay, people will often tell you, do not use hungrily, sadly, angrily. And yes, there are better words, but that's not the worst thing you can do to your writing. Okay. However, when you do dialogue, that is when it's, I don't want to say wrong, but don't do it. Okay. Don't say things like said lovingly, said angrily, said furiously. Okay. I hate your guts. I'm going to rip your heart out. He said lovingly. That's not going to work. Do I need to say he said angrily? No, because the actions and the dialogue my character is already conveying tells me how he said it. If I need to explain how my character says something in the tags, my dialogue is not doing its job. Okay. I love you. You are the most special person I've ever met in my life. I haven't been alive since I met you. He said lovingly. Do I need that? No. Okay. If the character, and if I want to show the opposite of that, okay, like I hate you, she says with a smirk, okay, that is, yeah, Mia cajoled. So that is, with a smirk, if the words are the opposite, I'm going to use the actions to portray the opposite. Does that make sense? Okay, so said is the hero of the writing world. Okay, I would rather have too many saids than have too many other words. That said, okay, if you're getting sick of said, because sometimes said is just always there, replace the entire dialogue tag with action. Okay, so I hate you and I wrapped my arms around them. Can you see how that's with a smile? Okay, or I love you and I wrap my arms around you. That is how the body language takes the place of the tag. Okay. But said is not going to lead you down the wrong path. Okay. So as I said, one of the things, so usually for me, one of the things we get wrong with dialogue is not including dialogue. Okay. Dialogue to me it's the lifeblood of your work. It's where your character comes alive. It's where the story takes, it's where the action in the story happens. So the first thing that we can get wrong with dialogue is not including dialogue. Okay. So I'm a big fan of needing dialogue. All right. There are times when you don't have dialogue. So for example, if your character is alone for a long period of time, how can you include dialogue? Make them phone someone, have them write a letter. Okay. If your character is alone and there's no chance for dialogue, can you go into a flashback where there is dialogue instead of showing me the character's thoughts process? Okay. What can you do with no dialogue? So no dialogue isn't great for me. I always try and find a way for dialogue, but of course, sometimes there is just no dialogue, and that's also fine. Okay. Sometimes the characters are quietly sitting together on the couch, and there is a comfort or a joy in that, but you're not going to spend an entire scene describing how lovingly and happily they're sitting on the couch, right? Okay. You can tell me it was loving and happy, and then we carry on with the story. Okay. The next mistake we make with writers is called talking heads. Okay, with dialogue. And that is something, like I said, when I put down the first version of my scene or my story, it's usually only talking heads. And talking heads means most of the time just the words spoken aloud. Maybe a dialogue tag for clarity. But my dialogue tends to come out quite, I also speak quite fast, you've noticed. So my dialogue comes out quite fast. And then I have to keep up with the dialogue, I just write the dialogue as it goes. I'll sometimes write on two sides of the page just to keep clear who says what. And then once I have the dialogue down and the gist of the story down, I will go in and add my dialogue tags properly. I will go in and add my body language and my thoughts. And then after that, I will even add my setting. Okay. I once wrote a post called How to Include Dialogue Without, How to Include Setting Without Citing like a B&B brochure. And that is exactly what you do with dialogue. Make your characters talk about the setting they're in and make them interact with the setting they're in, because that's a way to include all of that. Okay. So dialogue is an incredibly hard-working tool. All right. So no dialogue, first mistake. Talking heads, second mistake. If there are going to be sections of your story, especially if it's going and they're like quickly jabbing at each other, it will be short sections with no body language or anything like that, and that's totally fine. But most of the time, we include the body language, we include the thoughts, all of that. Okay, Ruthie?
Sorry, what do you mean by talking heads again? I missed that.
Talking heads is, let's say, have you seen it when they shoot a movie on green screen? Okay, it's just the characters, but there's nothing else behind them. Or like two puppets, if you imagine, that's literally what talking heads is, these two puppets. They have no bodies, they have no setting, they have no nothing. It's just that. So if you only have dialogue on only the words spoken aloud on the page, that is what happens. We call it talking heads. Okay, for short periods, that's not a problem. But if you only do talking heads, that becomes a problem. Okay, so when I say white space is good, that is a test to see if I have enough dialogue or too much dialogue, or too much dialogue meaning talking heads. So if I have, sometimes my scenes look like poems. Okay, there's just like this small little section of text on the left-hand side of the page, and then I know it's talking heads. I have to go back and add it. Okay, so visually it's a cue to tell me whether I have enough dialogue or not. All right, cool. So to fix my talking heads is then I'll go back and I'll say I layer my scene. Okay, so I just have my talking heads, which is the words spoken aloud. Then I'll go and I'll do my attribution so that I know who is speaking. And then, especially if it's only two people in the scene, I don't need to go, he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said. If I can follow along who is speaking, I can leave off the he said, she said. Or if it's too many he said, she said, I can replace it with body language or thoughts. Okay. Do you understand, darling? She said, trying to get a reaction out of the student in front of her. Okay. So Can you see how the teacher would say one thing and then start thinking something else? All right, so that's what we're doing. I sometimes got to teach little children, and then I was just like, always, okay, you get this right, everyone. And then it's like, no, they're going through it. Okay, so layering is a really, really fun tool to use. All right, go and add everything in and layer. And I literally do it layer by layer. So I'll do my attributions first. Then if I have too many attributions, I'll start replacing it with thoughts and with action. Action means body language. And if I do the action, that automatically anchors me in the scene. So then I include setting as well. All right. So it's a hard working tool. All right. In writing, we often say use strong verbs. Okay. So for example, one of the ways to get around adverbs is to use a strong verb. So I hate your guts, she hissed, versus I hate your guts, she yelled loudly. I hate your guts, she bellowed. Can you see how my verbs are working so much harder? Okay, then said loudly, because what is said loudly? Or said softly. Whispered is a much better word. Whispered is a sensory word, whereas said softly is, what does said softly do for us? Okay, so strong verbs will really stand you in good stead here. And by strong verbs, that goes into your body language as well. Okay, so a rule of thumb is don't ever tell me your character sits. Don't ever tell me your character runs. Don't tell me your character walks. Don't tell me your character talks. Okay. A character does not sit. They lounge. They perch. They sit, not even sit back. They lounge. They perch. They flop into a chair. Your character never walks. Your character strides. Your character struts. Your character, if I had to tell you the woman walks, what do you know about her? Nothing. But if I have to say the woman tiptoes, the woman shuffles, the woman saunters, the woman strides, can you see how I created 4 different women and you each had a picture in your head? But when I say the woman walks, so, okay. So your character lounges, your character perches. Okay, how does your character sit? Your character doesn't run. Your character bolts. Your character sprints. Your character jogs. Okay, the character shuffles to the end, to the finish line. Okay, strong verbs are really, really going to stand you in good stead, especially in all your writing, but especially in your dialogue. Okay, because remember what I said, I don't want the adverbs of manner. Adverbs of manner, as a rule, end in ly. Stephen King famously said, the road to hell is paved with adverbs. But like I said, I'm not too upset if you use an adverb here and there. But adverbs are the tequila of writing. There is no such thing as one tequila, right? And there is no such thing as one adverb. Okay, where there's 1 tequila, there's 2 tequila, 3 tequila floor. Where there's 1 adverb, and I promise you, look at your scene. You won't have used a single adverb. And then you use 1 adverb, and in the next 5 lines, adverb, 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 adverb. Don't know why it happens, but like once you let 1 adverb out the gate, they're all there. Okay, so make sure that you avoid them, or at least reevaluate their use specifically. Okay, and a cool trick to do is go into Microsoft Word, does it, Scrivener allows you to search, and Google Docs, I think. Go into find and replace and just type ly. It'll literally highlight all your ly verbs for you. And you can find them, evaluate them, and replace them if needed. I don't think you have to cut them out. Sometimes an adverb does work for me, okay? But what it does, it just gives you that moment to pause and to reevaluate. Okay, it'll also carry all the reallys and stuff like that for you as well, which are just sometimes weak filler words. Okay, so I don't ever want you to tell me my character said angrily, my character said furiously, my character said funnily, my character said stupidly. If your character's telling a joke and you have to tell me he said funnily, your joke didn't land, then we need a better joke. Okay, so make it work. All right. I'm not sure. My character said warily. I'm not sure it tells me they're unsure or wary. I don't have to say they said warily. Okay. I'm not sure. She slammed the door. Can you please leave me alone? Can you see how that conveys more than enough without having to go said wearily, said annoyedly, said unsuredly? Okay. Can you see what happens with adverbs? They blah, 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 blah. There's just more word the whole time. Okay. Another really cool thing to do with dialogue is to use it as a tool for repetition. And start paying attention to this when you're reading. Okay, so repetition in dialogue is brilliant. Okay. A good example is in a song. So if you've ever read or listened to Cats in the Cradle, go treat yourself. It makes me cry every time. I can't remember who sings Cats in the Cradle, but Cats in the Cradle, The Silver Spoon, The Little Boy Blue, and The Man on the Moon. Go and read that story. Okay, so find the song, listen to it, and then look at the lyrics. So the lyrics are on the internet. And then you'll see how they use dialogue to advance that story. It's one of the most, thank you, Jason Harry Chapin. Yeah, it's one of the most amazing pieces of storytelling through dialogue, because it's the father and he's talking about how the kid is, he doesn't have a kid, and then the baby's born, and then the kid, Dad, I'm just going to be like you. I'm going to be like you. I'm going to be like you, until the son grows up and he doesn't want to spend any time with his dad. And then his dad uses the same words, going, my son was just like me. And then, of course, there's that beautiful twist and irony in that ending, which is just, and that's just repetition. I'm going to be just like you, Dad. And then when he gets to the end of the song, the father goes, I realize my child is just like me. Another really cool use of repetition is Toy Story. Okay, I love Pixar and Disney. I think they're some of the best storytellers in the world. So if you're having a poop writing day, I give you full permission to go watch a Pixar or a Disney and pay attention to their storytelling, because it's really good. So when we start Toy Story, so Woody is Andy's favorite toy, and then it's Andy's birthday, and and Andy gets a new toy, Buzz Lightyear. And of course, they all go up to Andy's room, and Buzz Lightyear is meeting all the new toys. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, this is the coolest toy ever. And Buzz opens his wings and he shows them how he can fly. And Woody kind of goes, ugh, that's not flying, it's falling with style. And then, of course, they go on their big adventure, and they get lost together, and they have to find their way back before Andy moves. It's very big, it's very traumatic. And then in the final scene, when they finally they're so close to Andy, but if they lose him now, they lose him forever. It is Buzz's ability to fly that is going to save them. So Buzz opens his wings and says, hang on, Woody. And then it's Buzz who uses Woody's words. And Woody goes, we're flying. And then Buzz goes, we're not flying, we're falling with style. So by echoing or repeating Woody's words, we see the change in their relationship. Exact same words, but the meaning is completely different. Okay. So repetition in dialogue is a really, really great thing. It's also a nice way to show character, how your characters address one another, how your characters, excuse me, how your characters, does your character have a word that they like using? Or is it something that your character says a lot, or a phrase that they kind of throw around at each other? So in The Fault in Our Stars, for example, Gus and Hazel never say, I love you, but they say, okay, that's their thing. That's how they say, I love you to each other, is they just say, okay. And that's just, when I say okay to you, it's something it means I love you, and that's how they talked to each other. But for some other reason, they couldn't say I love you to each other. What's another one that we can think of? But any catchphrase, anything that they do, it's a very, very powerful thing. In your short stories, if you ever write short stories, or in your scenes, I call it topping and tailing. It is really, really powerful if you can start with the same line in the beginning of your story and end with the same or a similar line. It's incredibly powerful if you can do that. Okay. When we talk about the end of our stories, one of the things I'm going to tell you to do is to go back to the beginning and find a line or an image that you can repeat in your final scene. It becomes symbolic, it becomes thematic. So pay attention. Okay. If you write a line that you think, that's a snazzy line, highlight it, because we're going to come back to it and we're going to use it again. Okay. Repetition, incredibly powerful tool. Repetition and dialogue, verges on brilliance. Okay. Okay. I have spoken about dialogue and setting. Dialogue is a great way to include setting without having to give me like lines and lines of dialogue description. Okay, I can do that a lot. If I have to use the line, if I start my scene with "Come on, we're late," and then you hear over the speaker, final boarding call for passenger, you know where we are, right? You know what was happening. Someone's rushing across the airport carrying those stupid little wheelie bags, and they're rushing for the gate and they can't get there and dodging people out of the way. That line, final boarding call for passenger, does so much work for me. It really gives me a chance to get the story going without having to go. The airport was incredibly busy and there were so many people everywhere, and there were push carts and trolleys and little weird golf cart with the beep beep beeps. Okay. If I have to say what a dump, that tells me so much about the space we're in, okay? But also who says it, okay? If it is this very nice average apartment that these kids moved into for the first time and they're still getting their furniture together, and the snobbish friend comes and goes, "Oh, what a dump. My apartment's on Fifth Avenue. It's much nicer." Can you see how that tells me more about the character than it does about the house? So that's where it does a lot for me. Whereas if it is someone whose house is really falling apart and they want to sell it for this exorbitant amount of money, and the estate agent is like, "It's, has potential, what a dump," kind of tells me what it is. Okay. Something like "Where are we? None of this looks familiar." Can you see how that launches you into conflict in your scene, which just your characters have to react to that. They have to figure out where they are. And because none of this looks familiar, we have to find a landmark. And you see, no, all I see are trees. Okay. Can you see how that does a lot of the heavy lifting for me? Okay. When I scream "land ho," where am I putting you? On a boat, hopefully with a pirate. Okay. And some rum for Jason. Okay, if I have to go and it says access denied, what situation does it put you in? Something very sci-fi, techie, electronic. Either it is a computer we're trying to get into, either it's we're scanning a key card and we can't get into the locked room. Okay, but find these phrases in your world or in your situation that really, really help you. Okay. Okay. As I said, so that's repetition. Show don't tell is such a powerful writing tool. I know it gets shoved down our throats. I know we're all very sick of show don't tell at this point, but it is still a very, very valuable tool. Okay. But the trick is to know how to show, but when to tell. Okay. Because there are times when you need to tell. So I'm not going to give you this like huge thing where you have to tell all the time or show all the time you have to do this. It really, really depends on your story, and it depends on you as a writer. There are writers who tell and it's magnificent. Okay. If you have big chunks of world building and politics, you'll start working that in short little paragraphs, but it's pure telling, and sometimes you just need it, and there's nothing wrong with it. It would also be really weird. I mean, if you just showed you were actually writing a movie script and not a book. Okay, so we do have to tell. There's nothing wrong with it. But showing is a very, very powerful tool. We are going to later in the year do an entire class just on show don't tell. Okay, but dialogue is one of the simplest and the easiest ways to move your story into showing. Okay, so if you know that you tell a lot, or if people say, "Could you maybe show a bit more?" dialogue is going to be your friend. Now, if dialogue doesn't come naturally to you, I mean, you're not suddenly going to start writing reams of dialogue out of nowhere. What I would recommend you do is, if you have some kind of writing practice, I used to do that for a long time. So I often neglect setting and description because I like action, I like dialogue, I like my stories really fast paced. I actually skip long sections of setting and description when I read. I'm better at it now, but I just read the dialogue as much as I can. So I had to teach myself, because I skipped it when I was reading, I started skipping it when I was writing. So I had to, before I started writing a scene or I did my writing practice, I would at the top of my page just write dialogue, just planting a seed that I should start with my dialogue. Okay, or that I should include dialogue and setting. Sorry, I used too much dialogue. I had to go include setting. And then if you don't use a lot of dialogue, what I would do is just before you start your scene, just go, remember dialogue, make them talk. Okay. It's just a way to get out of the character's head to get them moving. Okay. So this is just like everything else. It's a muscle you're going to start practicing. Okay. But it's definitely one of the easier ones to start practicing. Okay. It's such a cool tool. Please use dialogue as much as you can. Okay. I said it earlier, get out of your character's head. Okay. That is truly something that we are going to, what you're going to get into trouble with. Okay. Is if you stay in your character's head the whole time, you're going to have a very introspective character and you're not going to have outward action. And we do want to know the character's thought processes. That's cool. But we also want to see the character moving on the page. So get out of your character's head. Okay. How do you do that? Try, if your story is at all, if it is at all possible in your story, not to have your character alone on the page. If they're alone for long periods of time, they can't talk to anyone. So then you'll use things like flashbacks, you'll use letters, you can even use diary entries. You can, but that's where I say phone a friend. If you find your character is alone for a long period of time and you need them to do something or convey something, then you're going to see that phoning a friend or walking over to the neighbor or something is a really great way to just kind of get that scene going and saying, hey, if your character walks out of their house and they're like these 6 army trucks suddenly driving past, very menacing and scary, and your character's alone, so what are they going to do? But they walk out and there's a neighbor and the neighbor goes, what's going on? So I have no clue. Let's go check the internet, but the internet's down. So what now? Okay. So can you see how just by having a conversation with a neighbor or phoning a friend really helps you to get out of their head? Okay. Now, some stories are just like that. Your character is just very introverted. It's the kind of story you're telling. Then, like I said, you must tell and you must tell beautifully. All right. Brilliant stories to watch where this phone a friend is a thing. Well, he phones everyone, but go watch Locke. I think it's with Tom Hardy, and it takes place in Britain. And I think, have I told you? I told someone about this. I can't remember who I did, but Locke. You learn a lot about concrete pouring. It's very interesting. But he is an engineer, I think a structural engineer, some kind of engineer, I'm not sure. But he's at the pinnacle of his job. Okay, it is going so well. It's the night before the biggest concrete pour in Europe, for example. So it's the biggest building that they pour because they have to pour the concrete at once so that it's all like one big piece. So it's like the biggest concrete pour. He's at the pinnacle of his career. It's a record-breaking project. His wife is at home with his favorite dinner. His sons are at home with his little soccer shirt or his football shirt, waiting for him to come home so they can watch the match together. Things cannot be better in this man's life. He gets one phone call. He climbs in his car and he drives away from all of that. By the end of the book, he's lost the job, he's lost the wife, he's lost the kids. And that entire story takes place while he's driving I don't know if he's driving from London somewhere anywhere, but he's on the highway. And that entire movie takes place in phone calls where he's fielding calls on his car phone, okay, on his hands-free in his car. Phone Booth, very old movie with Kiefer Sutherland, had the same principle where this guy's stuck. He can't move. He can't get out. What is he going to do? Who's he going to talk to? Okay. There are just times when the characters can't get out. Who's read All the Colors of the Dark? It's a really cool book. It came out last year, I think. Okay. Now, this character, okay, so there are 2 main characters. It's this guy who gets kidnapped and then his friend who looks for him. She comes to find him. And this story takes place over decades. And the whole time when this character was kidnapped, or while he was kidnapped, he swore there was someone with him. And he was determined to go back and rescue this girl And everyone says that girl is not there, that there was no girl, you made it up, you made it up. But that's a very interesting device to use because throughout the book, you're kind of like, dude, you made up this girl. You were there alone, you were in the dark, you were disorientated. It was a safety mechanism you used. But that was one of the things where, because what else do you do? This character is alone and he's trapped in the dark, which is he's alone and scared in the dark. He's alone and scared in the dark. He's alone and scared in the dark. That's not the most thrilling scene, right? But they introduced the secondary character. It's up to you to decide whether she was there or not. I'm not going to give it away. But it was just a fantastic device to use because the whole time everyone was doubting him when he said there was someone there. Okay, phone a friend. Give them someone to talk to. All right. Okay. Dialogue, as I said, is a brilliant way for including backstory. Okay. John had a very traumatic childhood and he was completely estranged from his parents. He never wanted to go back to his old hometown, but here he was. Okay. Imagine John walking into the convenience store and the guy behind the counter going, never thought we'd see you back here. Okay. Can you see how that conveys quite a lot as he wanted to get out? No one doubted that he wanted to get out. Why are you back? No, I'm here. I got some things, Oh, I'm sorry about your dad. I'm not. Okay. Can you see how you can convey a lot in dialogue through backstory, with or a lot of backstory in dialogue without having to do these giant blocks of text? Okay. As I said, dialogue introduces conflict. It's a fantastic tool. We struggle with conflict, especially in what we can call a gentler story, okay? Because conflict immediately, there's a huge misconception about conflict, and we do a whole class just on conflict, okay? Because people misunderstand conflict. When I say conflict is fiction, everyone's like, but Mia, I don't have a car bomb. I don't have a fist fight. I don't have, a nuclear warhead pointing at someone. Conflict is so much more than that. Okay, first of all, conflict can be positive and conflict can be negative. Conflict can be a job offer. Okay, a job offer, it's your dream job. It is triple the money you're making. It's in New York where you've wanted to go all your life. This is like you're going to literally work at the firm that you've always wanted to work at, but you've just met the love of your life who doesn't want to leave their hometown. Conflict. Okay. So dialogue introduces a lot of conflict. Your characters can say the wrong things. Your characters can, I had conflict with my mother the other day where she told me, oh, you're almost 50. And I was like, listen, I turned 45 3 months ago. I'm not that close to 50. But she thought she was doing me a service. And I was like, no, you're not currently helping me. I'm still clinging to the 45 part of 50. So, that's conflict. And I mean, it was just like this, oh, mother, okay, kind of moment. But sometimes that's all the conflict you need in a scene. Okay. Your characters lie, your characters insult each other, your characters make jokes, sometimes at someone else's expense, your characters can tease one another, your characters can talk too much, they don't talk enough, that's all conflict, okay? When your characters withhold information, that's conflict through dialogue or lack of dialogue, okay? So dialogue is a really, really great tool for conflict, okay? We've only got 24 minutes to escape. That's dialogue. It's conflict. It adds to the pace. It does so much for you. So dialogue is a fantastic tool for conflict. Okay. Your characters can threaten. They can argue. They can whisper. Okay. There's nothing more annoying if two people are whispering the whole time, and that causes conflict. Okay. It's a tool for seduction. It's manipulation. Your characters can manipulate through dialogue. Okay. If I have to tell you the character is manipulative, I'm kind of like, okay, that's interesting. But if I'm sitting in that scene and I'm going, this guy's manipulating you, stop, don't listen to him, he's a manipulative bastard. That is so much more effective than going, this character is manipulative. Okay. By showing me the manipulation, it's so much stronger and so much better. Okay. Dialogue allows you to go for, to hedge, to avoid, to fight. Okay. It's really, really a cool tool. Okay. There's so much conflict you can do. Now, another problem we get with dialogue is that your characters all sound the same. So this is something that we have to work on a little bit because we tend to write like we speak. So what you'll find is that quite often all your characters sound like you. So my humor is sometimes a little bit macabre, and my sarcasm is game is really high. So that sometimes means all my characters are a little bit acerbic, jaded, and sarcastic. Whereas it's fine for one or two characters, but I can't have every single character being, miserable. So that's where I sometimes have to, you have to make them a little bit lighter. You have to make this one heavier. Just go play with that and just be aware of how your characters speak. Okay. So I usually, if I have my character is just, she doesn't trust anyone. She doesn't like asking for help. She's very, whereas then she has this like guy next to her. He's so optimistic. He's this little ray of sunshine, which is a way that I use to contrast. And when we talk character, we'll talk more about these kinds of contrasts you can create with characters. But one of the easiest tools to demonstrate that is through dialogue. Okay, where my characters always tends to be negative and sees the worst. This character next to her friend character or her love interest is upbeat and positive and says, no, let's try this, let's do this and stuff like that. So those are one of the ways that you can, just their tone, the way they speak, you can make a difference in how they speak. Some people speak long gushes of words. Okay. Other people 2 or 3 lines, other people grunt. Okay. That's one of my favorite things about Henry Cavill's The Witcher. I feel it's very important to differentiate between the witches. Henry Cavill's Witcher is, that's like, I think the most important word he says through the whole thing is he like grunts at people. Okay. He has a lot of different grunts. We all know what they mean. But it's such a cool tool. So it's very interesting to see how they do it. Okay. So pay attention to how fast they speak, how long they speak. Pay attention to their vocabulary. If your character is a English professor from Oxford, they're most likely going to speak a very formal, very pure English without contractions, and most likely a more academic vocabulary. Okay. Whereas if your guy is hanging out in the market in Camden Town with the punks and the emo guys and stuff, he's most likely not going to speak in full sentences. He's going to talk in slang. He's going to have, it's almost like a dialect of their own that they're going to speak. He's going to have clipped words. He's going to have a different cadence. It might not be grammatically correct 100%. That's how you show these differences. So look at who your character is. I don't know if anyone's watched His and Hers on Netflix at the moment. It's a journalist and there's a murder. It's just very interesting because it takes place, now I can't remember where it takes place, but the way the characters speak it's somewhere in America, which really narrows it down, only 52 states. But there is just the way they speak was so apt to where they were. So, the minute they start talking, I know now I'm in the small town, whereas when the city people tend to have a different accent. It's a very interesting thing to take a look at in that story if you notice it. Okay. So how your character speaks really helps to differentiate who the character is. Then we have to pay attention to things like profanity, to accents and dialects. Okay. Now, profanity is an interesting one. So, for example, if my story is about drug dealers and human traffickers, okay, they're not going to say, oh, diddly squat. Okay. They're going to say, oh, fuck, and drop a few F-bombs and it's going to be a much rougher story than, if it's the head of the PTA. But can you imagine if the head of the PTA is, oh, fiddlesticks, I can't get the mic to work, and she's struggling with the mic, and then she finally gets the mic on and goes, oh, fuck. And then she's just said that in front of like all 374 fourth graders. Okay. Can you imagine how that plays off differently? So profanity is something you must really use with care and caution and very deliberately. Okay. Even if you are writing a story about drug dealers, if for some other reason I try to read The Wolf of Wall Street, if you had to take the F-bombs out of that book, I think you would reduce the word count by half. It's exhausting. And it actually got in the way of the storytelling because it destroyed the pace. So the rule of thumb is that dirty words look dirtier on the page. Okay. So just pay attention to when and why your character swears. There are characters who would swear more, and then there are characters who would not swear at all and be really uncharacteristic for them to swear. But then that one F-bomb is all you need. Okay. Then we have accents and dialects. I'm going to implore you to please not change the spelling of words, okay? If your character is French, please don't start all the words with Z, like with a Z in the front. Don't do that. Z strangers, zings, okay? Rather follow the cadence of a language. If your character is French, use words like bonjour and oui or merde or whatever. Use words that we are commonly familiar with. Most of us understand that's French, even if we don't understand the word specifically. Or with German, you can use common German phrases. Spanish, Isabel Allende uses common Spanish phrases in her work a lot, okay? And that helps set the scene. It establishes the nationality of the character. It really helps. Okay. Don't change the spelling of your words. If your character has a dialect, rather follow the cadence of the work, okay, of the words. So, if someone's from the southern part of America, it's a different type of writing. They have like different endings to their sentences. With French, often would end a sentence with oui. Okay, so those are ways that you can play with your work. Pay attention to how that language sounds and try and write in that rhythm as opposed to changing the spelling of words. Don't change the spelling of words, please. Okay. Y'all, sometimes all you need to establish where we are in a place and go from there. Okay. Oh, another thing which is like a newer thing that you can use in dialogue is to use it as social media text or posts, okay? A text conversation in WhatsApp is a piece of dialogue. It's a form of dialogue. The way someone types or texts tells me as much about them as anyone else. My kids drive me crazy. They don't use punctuation or capital letters, okay? And I get incredibly short texts from them. I'm just kind of like, no, that's not how we text. Hi, mom. How are you? Or whatever. Just like kind of give me some like kind of, can you pick me up? No, I can't. Ask me nicely. I want a capital letter and I want a question mark. But that will be our entire conversation. All right. But that's the kind of dialogue that we have with those things. So pay attention, like a social media thread, like a Facebook comments thread can be a fantastic form of dialogue. And the fun part about our books today is that we can start including these things in the stories. Emails have long been a very popular thing to include. Any book with this kind of thing in it, letters, emails, text, social media exchanges, those are called epistolary novels. So epistolary novels are things like, I can never say the name of this book, the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie. It's a combination of those words. Don't know what that was. Okay. That's an epistolary novel. It's a series of letters being exchanged. Perks of Being a Wallflower. Those are all a series of letters. We don't know who they're addressed to. It's really, really popular. James Henry. He's a South African tour guide and one of the safari guys, and he wrote the most hysterical safari book about as an email exchange with his brother. It was really, really funny. So, and it's just a whole bunch of emails. So it's really cool, I'm trying to think, there was another one that really came up. But it is really something, I mean, you'll see it so much more in movies and everything with the text exchange, and you'll actually see the text on the screen. You can do the same thing in your book. Okay. So that becomes another form of dialogue. All right. So that's really, really cool. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That is a lot. What other questions do you have about dialogue? Of course, you can, if you watch that punctuation thing, you'll see they talk about how to denote dialogue. So you can either do it double quotation, single quotation, dash, or no quotation marks. It's truly up to you what to do. Most common is to use double quotation marks. Okay, that is the most standard. A writer like Margaret Atwood, for example, doesn't use any punctuation, but she's also Margaret Atwood. So just pay attention to the kind of story that you want to write and see how you can use the dialogue in that. Okay. That's one of the things that I don't overcomplicate. People like to go, I don't want to use any dialogue. I only want to use the dash. Go for it. But I find it just easier not to complicate things for me. Okay, questions. What do you want to know? Let me quickly check. Oh, a 2002, maybe Ghost, where they just say ditto. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, 2002 is an old movie. I watched my husband was watching the new Scream movie. Oh no, I Know What You Did Last Summer movie. And the first movies came out in 1997, and all of those characters are in that movie and they're so old. And it was just horrible. And they're like, yeah, but it was so long ago. It was 1997. And I was like, no, it was like 20 years ago, surely. Um, it's super helpful. Cool. We know what Groot or to say by the responses from blog. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Jason, that's a great point. So Groot, R2D2, and Chewbacca actually just make sounds. But Han Solo and Luke and Rocket interpret what they say, and they can have like full-on conversations. Okay, when it goes, and then usually it's Luke or R2, no, not R2D2, C3PO, who would like interpret what they say for us. Okay, that always. Oh, another thing about profanity, if you do fantasy or sci-fi, profanity is like a whole new element to add to your language and to add to your word. If you enjoy sci-fi, it's one of my hands down favorite sci-fi books, is Red Rising. I think it's Pierce Brown who wrote it, but it is one of the most brilliant. I loved it. I read also, well, there's a whole scene. I've only read the first three. Apparently they go very dark after that. But it was such a clever idea, and it was so new and so refreshing. But he literally used one of the ways that they could trick or identify something was a swear word where it's a very classist story, and it's the rich versus the poor and the oppressors versus the suppressed, and it came down to like kind of how they swear, and that was one of the tricks of how to identify who a character was. It was very interesting. How he identified one of the characters. Highly recommend that book if you want to go take a look. Okay. Food for thought. Feel like going to revise. No, Anita, you'll get there. Don't worry. Okay. Anita, so what you say, you're going to feel like you want to go back now and change everything. Don't. Just go forward. And like I said, just pay attention to adding dialogue to your scenes. That's all. Okay. Again, if this is just going, crap, I just need to get the scene out, forget all about this. Okay, we are planting seeds. This is going to become easier and more natural, and you're going to go, okay, I get it, I get it, I get it. And that's how it's going to kind of start becoming something else. All right, you can do it. All right. Fun stuff. Are there no questions? Your heads are spinning. Okay, all right, cool stuff. Please run off into the wild, wild Sunday and go have a lovely day. I will see you all on Tuesday, the silent session, Wednesday's deadline day, and then we'll meet again on Sunday. Okay. Audrey, I'm going to be in touch with you guys for the rewrite within this week, and then you'll get quite a few things. Okay. I hope you all received the email because the rewrite class, classes. Dialogue classes today, rewrite class Audrey is next week, and scene class is on the 15th of February. Okay, that is how to structure scenes. What is the structure of scenes? What do we need to have in a scene? Okay, it's a cool one. Okay, happy days, friends. Go off and have a lovely Sunday. Thank you for your time. Bye.